Can a life have meaning years after it is lived? Can one person's commitment to a community not only continue, but gain strength 50, even 100 years later? Can a family's generosity inspire the next generation? In the Boston Foundation, there's a wall that honors hundreds of people who've answered yes to these questions. They are members of the Rogerson Legacy Society, named for the Foundation's founders. They stand on broad shoulders, like those of James Longley, who left the first bequest of $4 million to the Foundation in 1917. Harriet Bartlett, a highly regarded social worker who left her major bequest in 1960, and John McCann, whose charitable trust came to this foundation in 1964. His nephew and namesake is proud of his uncle's personal and philanthropic legacy.
He was very involved in Boston. Of course, he had a large practice. He was with Withington, Cross, Park, and McCann. That was the firm he was with all of his life as a practicing lawyer. Being the owner of two of the major restaurants in Boston, and of course Lockover's was one of the major restaurants in the world, he came to know a whole lot of people in the Boston area. I think his goal was to make sure that people who had a very serious need in life would be taken care of. You know, everybody wants to leave a mark in life somewhere. I know Uncle John well enough to know that as flamboyant as he was, he didn't do it for that reason. I think the reason he did it was that he was just very concerned about a segment of society that he knew he could take care of and wanted to and did so.
Ultimately, philanthropy is biography, and the lives we live inform our passions, our commitments, and our legacies.
I grew up in West Virginia. My father was a coal miner. My mother worked in a glass factory. My parents were second generation Italian Americans. They embedded in each one of us, my brother and my sister, myself, the need to give back, always give back. And so I grew up around that culture and that philosophy.
I'm an artist. I was born in Medford, Massachusetts. I spent most of my early years in the West End of Boston and in Medford. My grandparents lived in a house in the West End, which has since, or was torn down a long time ago, back in the late 50s.
I knew the West End in terms of trees and concrete and wagons that came with ice, which we as kids would go and kind of sort of take chippings of ice to eat on the street. The West End was a pretty mixed place. Obviously there were Jewish people, which is what I am. There were Italians who would be next door. It was just such a mix.
I was chairman of our hospital in Concord, and one of the reasons that I originally became involved in philanthropy is that the executive director of the hospital was trying to explain the advantages of giving to the hospital, and he said, look, some people have given us roads and synagogues and churches and schools and all these things, you know, we have to give back to the world something.
I was redoing my will and a few other things, and I decided that what I had wanted in my will no longer was applicable. I thought of what I wanted money to go to, and I went back to my childhood and thought of all the things that I had as a kid. And I decided that what really was important was education.
My field of interest is empowerment, essentially empowering people to make better lives for themselves, to reshape their lives when necessary, to give back to the community. And that's what the Boston Foundation is all about.
We've been fans of Warren Buffett's for many years, and obviously we can't give any way near the money that he can give. But when he made his astonishing announcement that he was turning all of his money over to Bill and Melinda Gates and their foundation to manage it, he said it was because he knew what he was good at doing and he knew what they were good at doing. And that's one of the reasons that we want to work with the Boston Foundation, is because we found someone who's good at that aspect of giving money away. It may not be our strength, but it is theirs.
Inspired by donors like these, today the Boston Foundation is reinvigorating the fund that addresses the most urgent issues facing Greater Boston. We're calling it the Permanent Fund for Boston, and we're inviting all those who want to contribute to this community well beyond their lifetimes to join us. Working with the Boston Foundation ensures that all future gifts will bear your name and inspire the next generations to leave their own legacies and help us build an even greater Boston.
When you first come to a new place, especially a big city, you feel a little bit intimidated. But I think the more I ran along the river and the more I got to know the city and people in the city, it became more important to me. And I think I care about my environment as well, not just the people, but the Charles River, the Esplanade, the parks. And I definitely want my money to go to help out those areas.
One of the things I think about living in Boston my entire life is it's always been a place where I feel comfortable. I feel like I belong here. And when I travel and I tell people that I'm from Boston, most people say the same thing. Whenever they come to Boston, there's some sense of a place of being, a commitment or a connection that they have, even if they haven't lived here.
Because Boston has been so good to both of us and has been so important to us in terms of our education, just everything, that I wanted to give something back to Boston. We've made most of our money in Boston and spent most of our lives in Boston, and I love Boston. It's the best city in the world.